Hey all, just a heads up, health and safety warning, just to look after yourselves while you are watching our show today, because we may be discussing things that may be upsetting for some. Things that may be covered will potentially be child abuse, domestic abuse, and any other type of abuse that some of the children and families that we have worked with have experienced. So just look after yourself. If you need to step away, please do, but come back and join us for a cup of tea. And that's always the aim, really, for us as social workers.
100%.
We don't want to stay in your lives.
Yeah.
Like, we're not trying to become part of the furniture.
Yeah.
Like, we'll come and have a cup of tea with you.
And that is the aim of the plan. It's to reduce the risk of harm. So putting, these things in place to say, this is what the social worker is going to do with the family. This is what the family needs to do. This is what we need education to do to bring it down and reduce that risk of harm so that we don't have to go to things like legal planning meetings. I'm Paris.
I'm Rita.
And this is Tea with the Social Workers.
Welcome, Tea with the Social Workers. Today, on this episode, we're going to be discussing all things Section 47. And you may ask yourself, what is Section 47? We are going to cover that in today's episode. We are also going to cover what's likely, what kind of case is likely to lead to a Section 47 response, and the different outcomes that may come out of the inquiries and the assessment that comes out of a Section 47 sort of response to harm. So let's start off by just answering the question, what is a Section 47? Because I remember on my sort of first week hearing that a lot, Section 47, and you see that fluster in the office. Maybe not now that we're not as sort of office-based, but definitely in our day.
Yeah, back in the day.
Sort of pre-COVID, all of us as social workers, we were very much in the office. So you see people's responses and reactions to certain things. And I remember seeing the response to, there's a Section 47 right now, we need to go to a strategy meeting. And it was just completely overwhelming for me at that point because I wasn't sure why they were responding in that way and why there were so many worried faces. And then there's the whole kerfuffle of trying to get everyone into the same room to have a discussion. So I'm going to bring it over to you, Paris, to just give us a breakdown of what is a Section 47? What is that?
So generally a Section 47 is what I would refer to as like a mini assessment that sometimes is inside of a Section 17. And, we spoke about Section 17s in episode 3, Section 17 assessments. You can have a side of that, a Section 47. So in terms of what a Section 47 is, under the Children's Act 1989, it would be where there's concerns that a child is at risk of significant harm or is likely to suffer significant harm, or significant harm has already occurred. So that means a referral has potentially come in and it's like, okay, this child has already been harmed, or we think they're at risk of harm. Everyone's scattering around the office. So in order for it to progress to a Section 47, you have what is called a strategy discussion. I think it's important to maybe mention who would be involved in a Section 47. Yeah. Because it's not a Section 47 or a strategy discussion without having police involvement. So you would have the referrer, the social worker, the social worker's manager, police. If there's someone from education will come in, and we'd have someone providing some information from health. And the referral will then be discussed, or what the actual concern is that has raised for a strategy discussion to take place. And then from that, a decision will be made through all parties as to what we need to do next. So everyone would kind of have a vote. Do we go through with a Section 47 or can this remain at a Section 17? If the decision is yes, let's go for a Section 47, we would then progress into this mini assessment where you're looking at the explicit reason as to why we think this child is at risk of harm or if harm has been met and what needs to then take place. So is it going to be a single agency? So single agency would be just us as social workers. We're going to go out and do this. Or is it going to be joint agency where we're going to do this jointly with the police? Generally, I would say you do joint with the police where there's been harm already met.
Yeah.
And at times when it's just single, the police might also say, okay, this is, you guys go check it out. Yeah. Single agency, but let us know if, we need to get involved or if we need to interview parent, carer or whoever the allegation has been made against. think that covers it?
I feel like that covers it really nicely. But in terms of a strategy meeting, when does that happen?
I guess a strategy meeting happens at the point of that concern being raised.
Mm-hmm.
So generally you have that before you go out and see the family or see the child or whoever's made this allegation, see the victim, I suppose. So you sit down and you have that discussion. I guess now COVID's
it's kind of changed it.
It's changed it a bit, and I guess a lot of it is remote. Before it was like, right, can you get to the office at this point in time, at that time, and can we all get in a room and sit down together? Whereas now a lot of it is done virtually, a lot of it's done online, which I think works better because then you can ensure that everyone's kind of there and everyone can tap in, because I guess we wouldn't necessarily delay going out to see the individual, the child, the person. But it might be, we can't have that strategy discussion until later on in the afternoon because there's not a room available or because somebody can't get to the office in time. So I think it probably helps that we can have these discussions a lot easier and a lot quicker now that we're like after COVID, I suppose.
Yeah, you're definitely right, because my experience of being in strategy meetings in the earlier days, sort of pre-COVID, was the strategy room looked like a boardroom.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking sort of about The Apprentice and how they all sit together, it gives that sort of vibe. So everyone's in there. And I just remember as a social worker feeling like, oh my days, I'm going to be part of this decision making. And especially at the end when they go around and say, right, what's your take? Should we progress this or should we not? And everyone in that room has to say whether they feel that it should be progressed or actually it shouldn't, and they should give a reason as to why.
Yeah.
So yeah, just remembering some of my anxiety in those early days about giving that.
Yeah, because I remember there would be some managers are just going to like chair the meeting per se, and they're going to go, right, we've received the referral, this is what we've got. He or she will read out the referral and then say, okay, health, can you give us your perspective or what you know about the family? Police, can you give us any information you have on the family? But then there were other managers who would be like, okay, you're the social worker, so you're going to chair the meeting, and you're like, oh. And like you especially like I'd be thinking, okay, I need to know this referral off the top of my head, but how could I know the referral? Like it might have just come in. Or sometimes it is a family that you're already working with. You're already doing your Section 17 assessment, your child and family assessment, and then an incident has taken place while you're doing that assessment, and that has sparked a Section 47 investigation or a strategy discussion where we're going to make a decision as to whether we are going to go ahead with a Section 47. I guess with a Section 47, it sounds, for families, if you say like we're doing a Section 47, they're just like, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
But for us, it makes a lot more sense in terms of we're using a different part of the law. And I guess that's how we tried to explain it to families. But my easier way was kind of saying, look, it's like a mini assessment. We're just focusing on this incident that's happened here or this allegation that's been made here. I am still continuing with my Section 17 assessment. This will now just feed into it. And just to be aware that actually when I first met with you and I explained the kind of tiers of intervention that from this assessment, from the Section 17 assessment, we could go, no further action, or we could go, we might feel that you need some early help support, or we might think that, this is a child in need Section 17. But actually, once we do a Section 47, we're kind of more on the likely scale to potentially have to go into the child protection arena. And if any case is kind of entering that child protection arena, there has to have been a strategy discussion as well as a Section 47 moving forward.
Yeah, I really like the way you just explained that. And I wish I'd had some of that as well to sort of give to my families. But what I used to rely on was really, I used to say something along the lines of, once we've entered Section 47, it shares the responsibility out to the multi-agency team. So before Section 47, you as the social worker can run with that case, you work directly with that family, and it's you and your social work manager that is essentially managing the risk.
Yeah.
Within that family's home or the external risks to that family. However, once you enter the sort of Section 47 arena, my understanding is that responsibility of responding to that risk is then shared with the partners, i.e. police, i.e. what is school doing, i.e. what are our health allies doing as well. So that was the easy way that I found to understand it for myself, and then I was able to give that back to my families. But I suppose a confusing thing for me was some cases are screened. So from our MASH team. So again, our MASH team is the multi-agency safeguarding hub where all the referrals go into. So sometimes that hub will screen and say straight away, this is a Section 47.
Yeah.
The confusion for me, especially in the beginning, was around when I'm already holding a case. Yeah. So that case has come in as an early intervention. Maybe little Johnny's just not going to school. Why is he not going to school? But then actually I get there, and having spoken to him, having sort of explored the family home and explored the family dynamics, there are other concerns that have come up from that visit. And I just wasn't sure where that threshold was for, I'm already working with this family. I kind of had to have the skills to work with them, but I think I need a little bit more. Actually, I think I need the support of my police partners, or I need the support of my health partners or education partners, so that the decision just doesn't sit with me.
Yeah.
It's that gauge. Like, how do you find that gauge? Where's that gauge for you in terms of...
I guess it's always difficult with thresholds, because what you'll find as well when you kind of work in different local authorities, different areas of London or even outside of London, is that threshold can differ quite slightly, very much similar, but you know, you could send the same referral to one local authority and they will say, okay, this is a Section 17, and another local authority might say, actually, I think let's go for a Section 47. Now, that could be based on the fact that the second local authority might have previous information on that family that maybe the first local authority didn't have. But I guess threshold, I always used to think, okay, again, what's the impact? Has harm already been met, or are they likely to suffer significant harm? And generally, it is around the impact of that, or what's the duration of this? Is it a one-off incident? Or is this something that actually, we've seen this with this family multiple times, and we've been trying to manage and put interventions in, but actually they're not working. And again, there could be multiple reasons why they're not working. Could be, parents are struggling to actually take on that intervention, or it might be that they just don't even see that there's anything wrong here and they think that we're just barking up the wrong tree. But yet the child might be saying something completely different. So I think that threshold is just kind of guided by the law. And I think where we say is likely to suffer significant harm. So generally as well, I think when there's an allegation that's been made, generally that kind of tips the scale without a question. And I think in terms of measuring a threshold, I think that's why we have the discussion, the strategy discussion, because at that point, everybody can feed in so that it's not just that threshold of what you might think. Because again, thresholds are fluid and some people can interpret it differently. So if you bring everybody together in a room, you get a good feel as to, has this met the threshold for us to kind of go forward.
So, case example.
Okay.
Yeah. Little Johnny.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey, little Johnny. Yeah. So, little Johnny has informed his health professional that he has met someone online. Little Johnny is currently seeing this health professional because he struggles with his social relationships. And he has informed this professional that he's working with that he has made a friend online. He informs this professional that this friend online says that he's 15, but he's never seen a picture of him. And this person has asked him to send indecent images to him. Little Johnny has shared this information with the professional because he has shared those images, and that person is now threatening that if he doesn't send more, he will post those images to his friends at school. Is that Section 47?
Yes.
Why?
Because the harm has already been met.
What's the harm?
The harm is that this child has their pictures out there. He sent it to someone who we don't know who that other person is. And this person is now threatening to leak these photos to someone. He's a child, so essentially they are indecent images of a child. So any person in possession of those images, whether it be an adult or child, it's at the point of a criminal offence. So again, when we're going in for this strategy discussion, it is likely to be a 2-partner agency with the social care and police, because it's actually a crime that is potentially going to be committed.
Okay, so same little Johnny has a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so a romantic partner of the same age, so peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
And he has broken up with that partner. And when he has broken up with that partner, who is the same age as him, has shared indecent images that they've consensually shared between one another with their school WhatsApp group chat. Is that Section 47?
Yes, the same still applies, even though it's peer-to-peer. It still
Wow.
applies because there's indecent images that have been shared of a child.
And that's on that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think when I was younger growing up, I feel like that was something that happened quite often, and I don't necessarily feel that it always quote unquote warranted police intervention or social care intervention. But I think with the way the world has changed and that we actually are speaking up for people when these things happen, we're now taking further intervention into ensuring that this isn't happening anymore, and that we're using the right tools to be able to claw back these images and letting people know that this is not okay, even if it is peer-to-peer. And I think maybe that's something that people don't necessarily realize. They think, oh, it's just children being children. No. It's not the case. It's actually the point that someone's images are being used. They're indecent images, and they've come into the hands of someone who you shared a relationship with at once, but we don't know where those images could end up. So on that point, I'd just say advice, don't send any indecent images, whether you're an adult or a child, because we've also seen with adults that this can be an issue. Where revenge porn, essentially, where men are using it to blackmail their exes and so on. So yeah, just please don't send any images, because it will come into social care, or it will be a criminal offence if you're an adult.
Yeah. Another case dilemma.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have a 16-year-old female.
Yeah.
And she reports to you that she is in a consensual sexual relationship with a 37-year-old man. Is that a Section 47?
I would like to say yes, but we need to understand the context. And I'd like to say yes, because in terms of my own morals and values, I think it's completely inappropriate for a 37-year-old to be in a relationship with a 16-year-old. However, 16 is the age of sexual consent. So that needs to be taken into account. With social care, we always talk about hearing the child's views and wishes. So we need to understand that child's views, but also we have to think in the context of exploitation. So has that child been exploited into that relationship? How do they view that relationship? Is it actually a true relationship, or is it an exploitive relationship? Or is this child being asked to do things and that individual is then taken from them and asking them to do certain things? So it's about understanding the context. But I don't believe it would necessarily be a Section 47. I think we'd be asking for further information.
I love that you've touched on that, because sometimes with especially young people who do find themselves in these situations where there is in their perception a consensual relationship, it can be difficult for them to see themselves as victims.
Yeah.
Or to see that person as an abuser. And it's just something I would like to highlight here. Perpetrators of certain types of abuse, especially sort of sexual exploitation, do use what is called the boyfriend model.
Yeah.
And it's just called the boyfriend model because generally the data that we have is that this violence is done towards girls. It doesn't mean that it's exclusive to them, though. But the boyfriend model is essentially where a perpetrator of this type of abuse will make that child or young person feel as if they are in a loving relationship. So when you are trying to speak to that child to say, we are worried about you or we are concerned, they're like, that's my man.
Yeah.
That's my boyfriend or that's my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And it can be really difficult to reframe that concern for them as something that they should be worried about. But using that same scenario, What if the 16-year-old then tells you, I've been seeing this person since I was 12. We didn't start sleeping together straight away, but they started by buying me gifts and picking me up from school, but dropping me down the road so my mum doesn't see me coming out the car.
Yeah.
Does that change how you view it?
It does change, because you have to think, okay, they're only 16 now. What was that quote unquote relationship like at the age of 12? So now we're again going back to that age of consent.
Mm-hmm.
We're below that age of consent. So again, it's trying to understand context, what was kind of going on in the family home at that time, what's going on for this young person, why did they feel that this was their partner, and trying to understand if they've been manipulated to say certain things. And again, they won't see it as necessarily manipulating, but the fact that the key part to that is they were dropping me down the road so my mum didn't see. Because why were they why didn't you want your mum to see? What was the reason for that? Why did they feel that, they couldn't meet your mum? So I would definitely be going down the Section 47 route for that, because it doesn't have to be something that's happened right now. Like we said, harm is either likely to suffer significant harm or has suffered significant harm. So we now need to investigate if that harm has happened. So yes, it may have been 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, but we still need to do that mini investigation to look into this situation. But also part of that mini investigation can look into that perpetrator. So looking into that perpetrator, you might then find, I say perpetrator, their so-called boyfriend or partner or whatever, we would then be looking into their history. Have they got a history of this? Do they have any kind of offences that are related to exploitation, any allegations even for sexual abuse or anything like that previously? But yeah, I'd definitely be going down the route of a Section 47 for that one.
Yeah. Okay. I'm in a place where I'm focusing a lot of my attention in my practice on contextual safeguarding. So, traditionally, the safeguarding frameworks that we have focus on the risk being inside the home. So how are parents or caregivers looking after that child? How is that child's development being impaired by the care they're receiving at home? But more recently, in the recent years within the social work world, there is a focus on external factors. Those external factors sit under the umbrella of contextual safeguarding. So what's the remit, do you think, for contextual safeguarding in a sense? Or should I give a case scenario of what that would look like?
What do you mean by the remit?
Like, how do you think Section 47 is met with these newer sort of external issues such as online risks?
We've spoken before about the law being dated. So again, as I've said previously, this is the Children's Act 1989. And then it was updated again in 2004. But since 2004, it's 20 years?
Yeah.
So the sections that we're using in terms of law isn't completely up to date. So generally things like child in need, child protection, they are built and were made to manage abuse issues that are arising within the home. And generally, like you said, that is to do with mum, dad, parent, carer, and the abuse or issues that people may be experiencing at home. Whereas when you talk about contextual safeguarding, these are the issues that occur outside of the home by external people and factors. So it may not have anything to actually do with the parents or how children are being brought up in their household. So actually the law isn't quite specific to manage and deal with those kind of external factors. So again, the law does need updating. It can work to an extent, but we definitely can only go to a certain level, I'd say, because it hasn't been updated to kind of bring in things like online media, just all the exploitation, but all the things that are kind of happening now, because most things are happening online. We have cyberbullying, all these types of things that again weren't really happening in 1989 and in 2004 were maybe just taking off. And when I say things like when I was in school, things that would have been okay when I was in school are completely not okay now, but the law hasn't adjusted to where we are today. And especially since COVID, because I think COVID spiraled us maybe 5 to 10 years ahead of time that we were supposed to be at. if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I remember when I was in school, we would openly talk about how we're disciplined at home in front of teachers. And some people would say some really wild things about how they're disciplined at home.
Yeah.
And the teachers would join in our conversations. Like, they'll be shocked sometimes, like, oh, well, you better not get in trouble because I'm going to tell your parents. But it wasn't the response that we would get now. Like, when I think back to some of the experiences that were shared by some of my friends or peers, when those conversations happened, I'm shocked. Because I look back and I'm like, that child was clearly being neglected, you know?
Yeah.
Or that child was clearly experiencing some sort of emotional harm or abuse.
Absolutely.
Or they were at risk in the community. And there was just no response.
No response.
So yeah, there's definitely a shift, I believe, in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that's why we're flying the flag, really.
Yeah, 100%. Because I feel like where we're saying when we were at school, you would see these things and notice these things, but not think there might be something going on at home. But it's taken us to kind of be adults, be social workers even, because maybe someone who's not a social worker or doesn't work in a kind of like this type of style of profession within health and social care, to be like, actually, something else might be going on there. So I think if you haven't necessarily got that knowledge or understanding, you do kind of think, oh, it's just another issue, another incident. And I think we are in a place now where we need to call things out. And I think people are calling things out. People are seeing things more and being like, actually, no, that's an issue. But unfortunately, I think that has come from learning from where we've seen serious case reviews or serious incidents or incidents where people like children have died due to issues that have happened in the home and also outside of the home. Like when we speak of contextual safeguard, and I think an important thing is if we're speaking of something like county lines, I think in our day and probably even before, there were a lot of young children, and I'm going to say boys. I'm not saying that girls don't get exploited into these things, but generally it is boys that are exploited into things like county lines, and they would be arrested and charged for these offences of carrying drugs and so on. Whereas now we are trying, I'm not going to say we are because we're still not there, but we are trying to see that actually this child's been exploited into carrying these drugs. They're not carrying this necessarily of their own free will because they think what they're doing is the right thing. They've been exploited into this situation. So I think we are getting there. And when I say we, social care, I think we still have to do a bit of work with our other partner agencies, i.e. the police, in terms of them kind of seeing this for what it actually is, that it is actually exploitation and not just, you know, a young black boy who's, you know, on the county lines selling drugs.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about things like adultification of children.
Yeah.
Especially when these strategy meetings and things like that are happening, when Section 47 inquiries, assessments are being completed. Are we adultifying the children that we are working with? So yes, you have a 17-year-old who presents as quite strong. You know, they've been on the road, they've been doing what they need to do. Maybe they're the main providers for their families, for example. So they present as much more mature. You might have females from particular backgrounds, you know, they got front, they got back, you know, and when you see them on appearance, they do appear much older than they do. I know I was one of those young people. But how are we as professionals speaking about those children? How are we responding to the risks that those children may be facing? And are we basing our responses on how they look to us?
Absolutely.
So I really like that you sort of touched on that as well.
Yeah.
But just to understand as well, so we've done our strategy meeting. The decision has been made in terms of, right, people have voted, let's go this way or let's go that way. Right, social worker, go and complete your Section 47 inquiries. What are the likely outcomes of those inquiries?
So what I would first do, or what is important that you need to do, is speak with the child by themselves. And that is something that we would also do within a Section 17. But in terms of Section 47, there's been an allegation made, or we think this child is at risk of significant harm, or like we've said, harm has already been met. You now need to speak with this child and get their take on things and what's happened, and speak to them in a child-friendly way to kind of understand what's going on for them. We then need to, again, speak with our partner agencies and gather the information from them as to what information they hold on this family, what work they've done with this family, if they have any idea as to what's been said and has this come up before. Because something that I have found working with partner agencies is that sometimes these things have been said, it's just been kind of brushed over or not actually been intervened with at that time. So you want to speak with your partner agencies, you want to speak with the child, of course you want to speak with the family or the perpetrator, whether that be a parent or carer or someone within the home. Obviously, if there's a perpetrator externally, the likeliness of you being able to speak with them is maybe not there.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be then for the police to try and investigate and see if they need to go and have conversations there. But our kind of main work is speaking with those in the home.
What if the family says no? So you said you want to speak to the child. I know I've experienced this when you want to see a child alone as a social worker, or you want to speak to the family and the family says no. Or I want to sit with you when you're speaking to that child.
I think it's quite common that sometimes family members can feel like, actually, no, I don't want you speaking to my child. I don't want them to know what a social worker is. But I always used to get around that by just explaining what it is that I'm going to speak to this child about. Not explicitly, I'm going to ask them X, Y, Z,
Mm-hmm.
but I would just try and let them know that actually it's going to be a really child-friendly conversation. I'm not driving the conversation in any direction. I'm just trying to get an idea from them as to, what's taken place or what the issue is. And actually, in terms of Section 47, we don't need consent. So we're kind of at that point where, it's nice to work under the basis of consent. And that's how we work in terms of building relationships with family members and saying, like, is it okay? I'd like to speak to the child and, these are the kind of things that I'd like to speak to them about in terms of the concern. However, we don't need that consent at that point in time because the risk outweighs consent. So when we go back to talking about Section 17, generally we want to ask for consent. We want to say, we'd like to complete this assessment. We feel that there may be some need that your family has. And in terms of us doing our assessment, we'll be able to kind of signpost and identify the need here. However, with Section 47, it might also be in our best interest to speak with that child without the parents knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that we can do and will do if necessary at that point. Because if the allegation is potentially against a parent, we don't want to run the risk of potentially speaking to that parent and then they go and say something to the child, like, you better not go and tell them that this happened or that happened. So in some cases, we will get straight out there. When you say everyone's faffing around and everyone's like, oh my God, we're rushing around. It is a case of, you kind of want to get to the school maybe before parents turn up. And that can be quite hard to hear, especially if there's like a parent that might be listening to this now and thinking, excuse me, speak to my children without me, get to the school before me. But it's understanding the remit in which we're working under, and we are working in the best interests of the child. And it might not seem like that or feel like that to a parent, but we're not here to make things up or to be the bad guy. We're doing this to protect the child and ensure that their needs are being met. And actually, if there has been an allegation made or there are concerns, that actually we understand those fully to be able to address them and reduce the harm. That is the point here. We want to understand the harm, but also be able to reduce it. And I guess in terms of reducing that harm, that's what brings us on to like plans.
Yeah.
Certain plans. So we spoke about child in need plans, sections which again comes under Section 17. I feel like I'm very much like Section 17, Section 47, I'm flying around all these sections, but we spoke about Section 17 and having what would be a child in need plan, but then there would be a Section 47 can lead into a child protection plan and having a child protection conference. And maybe you can kind of give us the lowdown a little bit on child protection conference.
When a case gets to a place where actually, as a multi-agency team, it's been decided that we're worried enough. We're worried enough that if statutory intervention isn't put in place, that this child's development is going to be impaired.
Can you just let us know what you mean by statutory?
So statutory, so when we're speaking about the different thresholds, statutory is when social workers get involved, in essence. So it is when threshold has been met. So when a child's development is likely to be impaired without any intervention from, for example, social services or other universal services, then that means statutory intervention is required. So if this family doesn't get the support of a social worker team, or if this family doesn't get the support of whatever service has been identified for them, then that child's development is likely to continue being impaired or be impaired in the future.
Well said.
Yeah? Oh, because I felt like I was faffing.
No, I think that was really clear for anyone that didn't know.
But yeah, essentially, some of the assessments that we used to complete when we are worried enough that, okay, we've gone out to see the family, we've spoken to the child, we've spoken to parents, we've spoken to people involved in the professional network. When we feel that we're worried enough from the information that we have gathered, what can happen is that we can then recommend that we go to a child protection conference. And in that child protection conference is an independent person who is referred to as the CP chair or child protection chair. And what that person is essentially there to do is to hear the information. So again, back in our day, we would sit in a boardroom style or conference space, but now again, it is done virtually. And that person will have reviewed our assessment. They would have reviewed the information that is shared by everyone else. They would have a chance to speak to the child if the child is at a stage where they can attend their conference. And they will also speak to the parents, and they will support the multi-agency team along with that family to make a decision about whether a child protection plan is necessary. And if it is deemed at the end of that conference that yes, it is necessary, they support the people within that network to put a plan together.
Yeah.
And in that plan, it may address different areas of that child's development, i.e. their social development, i.e. the educational development. Is it that this child hasn't been at school for the last 6 months? And that needs to be part of the plan to make sure that little Johnny gets to school every day on time. Is it that their emotional development needs to be supported? So a referral to CAMS, for example, is going to be done. That could be part of a child protection plan. And parent being supported to make sure that they are taking that child to said appointment. That could be part of the plan. So there's different ways. However, it can be that at that conference, that concern is raised enough for legal action to be potentially explored or considered. But that would be discussed with the parent and the professional network, and that would be done outside of that conference in what is called a legal planning meeting. So each local authority social care has their own legal team.
Yeah.
And that legal team is what helps them in those situations to decide whether social workers have the legal right to make a move past that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the threshold. Has threshold been met legally to cross into the court arena?
Yeah. So
are we going to start applying for orders? Are we worried enough that a child needs to be removed from their family home or temporarily taken away?
Yeah.
So many different things can be discussed in legal planning meetings, but essentially that's what it is. And yeah, from those plans can go on to work really well. And they can then get de-escalated. So we've spoken about cases going from Section 17 to Section 47, but there is also scope for Section 47s going down to Section 17s and then completely closing down. And that's always the aim.
Child protection plans going down.
Child protection plans going down.
To Section 17.
And that's always the aim really for us as social workers.
100%.
We don't want to stay in your lives.
Yeah.
Like, we're not trying to become part of the furniture.
Yeah.
Like, we'll come and have a cup of tea with you.
And that is the aim of the plan. It's to reduce the risk of harm. So putting, these things in place to say, this is what the social worker is going to do with the family. This is what the family needs to do. This is what we need education to do to bring it down and reduce that risk of harm so that we don't have to go to things like legal planning meetings. I think it's important to say that you can remain on a child protection plan maybe up until 2 years.
Yeah.
And to put into context, just before we kind of wrap up, I think it's important to remember that with those child protection plans, they're great and it is a way of reducing harm, but you have to think, okay, if we've sat on this child protection plan and we've been doing this work for 2 years because we are concerned that there's an impact into this child's development because of concerns that are happening in or outside of the home, if we haven't got somewhere, or there's continuous issues occurring in the home that's impacting this family or child, that's when we need to also be looking at legal, because actually you have to think that's 2 years of someone's life. That's 2 years of somebody experiencing harm or likely to suffer significant harm. So I think it's important to mention, because again, where we've spoken previously about, social workers just coming in and removing children, this just kind of shows the tiers and the thresholds and everything that we have to go through before we even get to looking at removal and legal action. And again, even legal action, as much as we have a legal team, they will be asking you, have you done this?
Have you done this and that?
Have you done that? Have you worked with the family? Have you attempted to do this? What has the parents done? Why haven't they done this? Have you explored why they haven't done this? Because the plan is to reduce and come off of the plan, not go further to social care. So I just thought that was important to note as we kind of wrap up. So
we've wrapped up. That
is Section 47, strategy discussions and CP plans.
Thank you for joining us today on our podcast, discussing all things Section 47 and above. Any support that may be required, please just look down in our description box where you can get some extra support from our services that we've tagged below.
Yes, and share our podcast with your friends, with your social workers. Subscribe to the channel, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at TWT Social Workers. Thank you.
Bye.